Thank you everyone for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be talking to you guys. I wish we could have done this in person, but unfortunately that's not possible now. So I hope you're all doing well. Uh, so did your semester start?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir, it has started.
Our semester starts in the next 2 days. It starts from October 1st. So we are busy setting up the systems now. So yeah, anyway. So yeah, it would have been nice to visit the institute. I come to the institute on and off, but since the past 2 years, I mean, I didn't. Feel free to interrupt me. Okay, if you have any questions anywhere, just stop me. Prakriti, you can pause. If anyone has any questions, you can stop and they can ask. Okay. So I just so this talk it's short. I mean, according to me, there are 7, 8 slides, and I just thought about uh, what information would have helped me before going for PhD or before going for a postdoc. Or I mean, I was thinking out how I made my decisions at every level and what information would have helped me make those decisions. Okay, and some of the information, I mean, some of the advice sounds very cliche, but it's really, from my experience now, 15 to 20 years, that's the only advice you need. And if you really follow it up, you'll do well. I mean, it's not complicated at all. Okay, so let me start, and then, and if you have any questions, as I said, feel free to interrupt. Okay, so can we go to the first slide? Slides.
It's Parishism.
So can she change to the first slide, the second slide? Okay. So let's start. I mean, so my experience is mostly in an academic setting. All my life I worked in universities, so let me stick to that, okay? But before that, I mean, it's an important decision you guys have to make around your 4th year or 5th year if you're in integrated MSc, or in your first year if you're in 2-year MSc. So I would say, yeah, think ideally you should be thinking about in your 3rd year, I believe. By the time you're finishing your 3rd year, you should be thinking about what you really want to do. Because yeah, that decision, I mean, most of the, actually in your life, as I said, only a couple of decisions play a major role, and this is one of the decisions. Okay, so think clearly about what you want to do, then you can make adjustments, because you have another year and a half to decide, uh, to plan your move. So that's the ideal setting if you decide around 3.5 years. And some of my friends had a clear idea of what they want to do, and yeah, some of us just went with the flow. So, but I really admire the guys who had planned. So nowadays, now you have many more opportunities. But when I graduated, I mean, like a majority of the institute just went abroad. More than, I believe, 80% of the students just went abroad. And in my batch from chemistry, from 5-year integrated MSc, all of us went abroad. And from the 2-year MSc as well, out of 20 students, maybe 18 went abroad. Because, and also, so the only other opportunity for us at that time, okay, for chemistry, you forget technical jobs without a PhD. The main industry that was booming that time was the IT services industry. So they were the ones which were majorly hiring during that time. We didn't have major consulting firms coming like McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group. All these firms didn't show up that time. The other only company was the Schlumberger, actually. So I was personally not keen to do a PhD. I thought I'd just take up a job somewhere. But then what I noticed was I saw some of my seniors who were working in different industries coming back to the institute and then trying to apply for a PhD or master's abroad. So when I talked to them, they said the job was boring, at least for majority of them. Then I thought about, sorry, yeah. Does anyone have a question? Okay, so let me continue then. So then that's where I started thinking though. Since many people were resigning their jobs and coming back after a year saying that they're not satisfied, Then that's when I thought, okay, maybe I should give it a shot. So although I didn't plan it properly, you should be planning it ideally. So think clearly about what you want to do around your third and fourth year, and try to be independent, be courageous. Okay, don't be swayed by your friends and other people. Their interests or what they would like to do might not be interesting to you. So, and at the same time, don't chase all available options like CAT bhi denge, UPSC bhi denge, GRE bhi denge. And that is also not ideal. As somebody said, having more than three priorities is having like zero priorities. At 24 hours, we cannot do everything. At the maximum, you should have two priorities. Okay. I mean, that itself, I would say, is excess because it's very hard to deal with it. So think carefully and do not chase all available options. Okay. And I would really say that just go after something which really interests you. Because as I will talk to you in the next few slides, to do anything significant, it requires a lot of hard work. It requires, be it research, be it a startup, entrepreneurship, you have to work like hell and you have to slog. It's not like a 9 to 5 job where you go home and switch off at 5. So unless you do something which really interests you, you cannot keep that hard work. So that's the key actually. So yeah, think carefully around your third year, fourth year maybe, or whenever. Thinking is very important, okay? So why is that? So can we go to the next slide now? So now if you still think to be an academic, again, think again hard because it's really a long haul commitment. So if you want to be an academic, you need a PhD. Now a postdoc experience is compulsory in almost every institute. So a PhD requires on an average 5 years. So all of us dream of finishing it in 4 years. I know only one person who has done it. All my job mates took 5 years. So 5 is the average. A majority people finish in 5, at least in the US. Again, if you go to European setting, Germany and all, you can do it in 3.5 because there's no coursework and so on. But I think the US system is pretty rigorous if you want a PhD. They train you in many other aspects than a German PhD. So that's one thing. Then you need a postdoctoral experience. Yeah, then, I mean, if you're lucky, in 2 years it works out. But some people end up 4, 5, 6, and a couple of PhD. So it's really a long haul. So the point is, unless you are interested in it, you cannot keep up that work for this longer period of time. Okay. So, and the other thing is, you will be spending the best years of your life doing it. So, decide carefully what you want to do. Okay. So, think about what is your motivation. It could not be very complex. For me, it was very simple. I like thinking about problems and enjoying trying to solve something or writing a code doing something. So that was my simple motivation. So I could just do it for day in and day out. I could survive. So that's the only motivation for me. But you have to think about what is, and some of my friends in the US had different motivation. Like one lady was diabetic since childhood, so she wanted to work on diabetes research. So that was her motivation. So different people had different motivations to do it. So you have to find your own motivation. Mine was very simple. I just like thinking about some things and just trying to understand things. That was my only motivation. So unless you have that motivation, you will not do it. And again, okay, so you like to think about problems. Now, what kind of work do you like lab work, theoretical work? I hated doing experiments when I was an undergrad. I just didn't have the patience to sit in front of the bench, do the experiment patiently, and so on. So that's when I chose, okay, let me do a theoretical kind of work. So since I enjoyed coding and analytic work, I just took up theoretical research. Other than that, there's no other. So the point again here, what I'm emphasizing is, if you try to do something that, okay, if I do something, it will get me a job, then you'll have those painful 5 years because you're really not enjoying the work. You have to get up every morning and go. If you hate doing that, then your quality of life will suffer, your research work will suffer. At the end of the day, after spending 4 5 years, you will not be doing a very good job at it. Okay, so I hope I'm driving that point very clearly. Okay, so do something just because you like to do it. If you have other motive, especially for things like a PhD or a postdoc, since it's like a 5 year commitment, it's not like your undergraduate thesis where you work for less than a year, you write your thesis and move on. Okay, so there's a huge difference there. So, okay, so can we move to the next slide? Okay, I said take ownership of your work, which is very important because a research problem is your problem. It's not your advisor's problem. Okay, I mean, in US they call advisor, in India some people call guide. I mean, that name itself tells you is just advice you or giving you some guidance. Okay, you are the one who is doing the work. So unless you think that it is your problem, you will not do a good job at it. Okay, and even making a significant advance, I'm not saying a major breakthrough in science, even pushing the boundaries of what people know requires a lot of hard work, okay, and persistence. And so unless you think that the problem is your own problem, unless you're emotionally involved with it, you're trying to solve a problem. There's no trying to find a solution. So every day you'll have some obstacles. Something is not working, something is not converging, the code has bugs, the document is not working. Since you're pushing a boundary, right? Okay, so day in and day out, you'll have problems. So unless you really like the problem, you cannot survive that negativity. Okay, every day something is not working, or you're trying to make some increments to it, but something happens and it doesn't work. Like for me, I can tell you from my example. So my first years, so I was developing a simulation code, and there were bugs in the code. Unless you enjoy coding and unless you like the problem, it's very hard to fix those bugs in the code. So the code is like 5,000 lines nowadays or 10,000 lines. So you're plowing through that one bug which is giving you nightmares. Sometimes sometimes it can take you like 30 days just trying to fix a single bug in the code. So unless you are at it every day in and day and night, you're thinking about it, okay, what is going wrong? You're not able to fix things. So that's what I mean getting emotionally involved at it. It's not like, okay, you try it from 9 to 5, okay, mera kaam ho gaya, I'm done for the day, and then you try to do something else. That thing generally doesn't work. Okay, so that's what I mean. So unless you're really interested, that means the problem is there at the background of your mind. Like, okay, what is going on? You're subconsciously thinking about things. This doesn't happen if you're not interested in the problem. Okay, so that's the key. So you have to like the problem, you have to be emotionally involved in it because it's your problem. Just because you're working for an advisor, it's not his problem. As my postdoc advisor used to say, I got my PhD long back, it's your problem. So you have to solve it. I mean, he's just giving you some advice to do it. So at the end of the day, if you like all this, you'll write a thesis which you'll be proud of and which is very important. So even at the end of the day, after 5 years, you might think that, okay, I'll be an academic, but in these 5 years, you see many things and you experience many things, and your priorities might change by the end of fifth year. You might say that, okay, this is where I stop. I'll take up an industrial position, or I'll do something else. So, but even then, if you, for example, if you want to do industrial research, they'll come and they'll invite you to give a talk. It's not a normal interview and there's we are hired. Most of these positions require you to go to the research center, present your PhD thesis work. Unless it's very good, they will not hire you. So unless it's not a good thesis, it's very hard to get that position. And that doesn't happen unless you are like really involved with the problem and you try to solve it. If you do that, that shows up in your talk at the end of the day. At the end of 4 or 5 years, it clearly shows up. Your effort shows up, your thinking shows up, your work shows up in the talk. So that is very key. If you think that you can coast for 5 years, write something, that also shows up in the talk. People will clearly see that that effort was not there. There's no creativity there. There was no pushing hard at a problem. So people, that clearly shows up again in that talk. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say think carefully whether you want to do it. Okay, and even when you want to do it, pick something where you really like that work. Just don't do it because it will get me a job or it will get me something. If you're good at it, you'll definitely get a job. So that's not a problem. So focus on the process than the end goal. Okay, so that's the key. Okay, so that's one thing. So let's go to, okay, so now you have decided, okay, let me apply. For your PhD, you don't have to work in the same area as your UG thesis. That's what majority of the students do it. Even when we have our PhD interviews, students come and say, I worked on this problem, I want to continue working on it. It doesn't have to be that. You explore, actually, I would really recommend people to explore. You can try to know about more problems. That is possible if you look at general journals. You have to do that since you are interested in a PhD. Look up general journals like Science, Nature, or Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States. So these are the general journals which publish papers from all kinds of areas. They are not focused, right? So by browsing those journals, you'll see what are the interesting problems which people are trying to attempt to solve. So that will expose you to new research areas. And the other thing is, of course, attending seminars and talking to people. So that will also open you up to new research areas. So my thing is, don't commit early, okay? Don't commit just because you worked on a UG thesis. Yeah, just don't decide that, okay, let me continue. I mean, if you really like it, of course, you do it. But I would say that have an open mind and explore it more, okay? So just based on your some 8 to 12 months of research experience, don't commit the research area. Of course, if you're really interested in the research area, then look for groups which are excellent in that research area and then apply. Okay, so there are some groups which are exceptional, but they are not in high ranked universities. So, but if you go to those groups, you'll be trained well in those research areas. Like, for example, one of my UG students this year got admitted in University of Washington. I mean, he's an exception, but he accepted it, which is not a very high ranked university. But he is interested in working in designing sequences which for these biomolecules which fold into particular sequences. So the David Baker's group is like the world leader and he works there. So his goal was to work with him. So he chose that instead of any other high ranked university. So if you're interested in that, of course, I encourage you to pick groups which are exceptional in those areas and apply. But if you're not, if you're unsure, right, then just apply as high as possible. Okay, this is just a thumb rule, okay? Apply as high as possible because generally if you go to a high ranked university, you have multiple groups doing well. Then you can pick a group which is of interest to you there. So I was unsure of what I wanted to do. Of course, I knew, okay, I'll work in theory, but I didn't know like what I really wanted to do. So I just looked at like, okay, the top 10 universities randomly chose something which looked interesting and applied. And then I went there and chose a research group. So yeah, it's up to you, okay? It all depends on what you want to do. It's good that if you really like an area, then just go for exceptional research groups. Otherwise, just pick as high as possible depending on your circumstances, okay? So that you can just go there and decide. It will give you more options. And picking a university, I mean, the other thing I want to warn you is picking a university based on one research group is also tricky. Because once you go there, I mean, of course, there are many people wanting to join that research group. So the The professor, they might hire only 1 or 2 students. And if you cannot get in, then your life would be miserable there because you are not interested in any other group, then you'll have problems there. So that is one thing which you should be really worried about when you're going to a research university or a department to work with one specific person. Okay, so it's ideal that you apply to places where you have like 2, 3 options, where you like to work with 2, 3 people there. So if one doesn't work out, you work with the other person and so on. Okay, but if you're going to work with just one person, just make sure that he really takes you in. Otherwise, yeah, you'll be in trouble. Okay, so that's the other piece of advice I would love to give you. So can we move again? Good, next slide. So yeah, so how to choose your advisor? Okay, so this again depends on first work, then what you do, what you want to do after your work. So as I said, again, don't pick any group based on other than the other than any other motivation, like, okay, if I work in that area, I'll get a job. If you do that, again, I'm repeating, your 5 years will be miserable. You will not like the work. You just chose it because you'll get some job at the end of 5 years, which you may not even get. So don't do that again. So pick a group which you enjoy working, a research problem which you enjoy working, then look after the things. Then based on what you want to do, see whether they're going, if you want to be an academic, just see where their former students are. That gives you a very good indicator. Where are the old students? Okay. If you want to be an academic, just see where the old students are. Most of them are, whether they are in academia or they are in industry. If you want to be in academia, generally pick a group where the advisor pushes majority of the students to academia. Some groups are very good at industrial consulting and industrial research. So if you want to go into industry, that's the group which you want to go, and that's the problems which you want to pursue. Okay, and so these are again thumb rules, okay, but there are many practical issues which come in, like whether you're working in an old research problem or an emerging research area. What is the research funding there? Employability, etc. So you have to keep track of these things also. For example, I can give you an idea. So the problem with working in old areas, okay? The problem is if you work in an old area and you want to be an academic, so the universities already have people working in those areas, okay? So the question is, why will they hire a new professor in that area unless someone is retiring? They would not like to have multiple people working on the same problems, right? So that doesn't make sense for them. So at max, they'll have 2, 3 people working on the same problem. But generally, if it's an old research area, there are people generally working in that area. Unless someone is retiring, they would not replace him with a new one. Okay, so that's one of the drawbacks of working in old. If it's an emerging research area, of course, it's risky, but most of the universities do not have professors working in those areas. That's where they would like to hire them. Even the research funding goes to those areas because that's where they want to push, right? So those are the areas majority of the fund starts to flow. Okay, so these are some of the other practical things we should really think about. Okay, so it's not very straightforward. Now, can we go to the next slide? So at the end of the day, even if you do it, this is my advisor used to say, is a PhD enough? It's not enough. There's actually a book which I'll recommend you in the next slide. So you need to master many other skills. Okay, so you need to be very good at writing because all your research papers you have to write. You have to enjoy writing, and you'll do a lot of writing. Believe me, your like most of my days nowadays, whenever I'm focusing on my research work, 80% of the time goes to writing. So you have to really enjoy writing. If you hate writing, then Yeah, it's more or less the career is doomed, because especially in the Western countries, because in the Western countries, funding is very competitive. All your proposals you have to write, and your writing has to be very persuasive. You are persuading someone to give you the money to do what you want to do. So unless you write well, that's impossible to do. If you write very badly, nobody, after the first paragraph, that's it, it's done. That's how your papers are also. If you don't write well, they'll stop reading your paper. That's it after the first paragraph. First, they look at the title. If the title looks interesting, okay, they'll read the abstract. If the abstract is boring, that's it, they'll delete the PDF. Now, if the abstract sounds interesting, then they'll go to the first introduction and so on. So unless the writing is very persuasive, nobody will read your papers. Okay? So writing is very important to it. Like fortunately, my PhD advisor emphasized on it very highly. It's really, really important. Of course, your presentation skills, it doesn't matter how hard you work in the lab, you solve a very important problem. Unless you communicate it to others, your peers, there's no point. I mean, people will not appreciate it. Your hard work doesn't show up unless you give a very good talk. It's like your movie making. You have an exceptional story, but the director screws up making the movie. It shows up there. You must have seen many movies, where I mean, you have the screenplay, you have the acting and everything. That's exactly, your talk is exactly like that. You're presenting a story. You have a problem, you're explaining to people how you have solved the problem and what you think about it, what are your conclusions and so on. So it really flows like a story. So unless you're a good director, it's impossible. So these are some of the other skills which you have to really master. And the other thing is you have to good with people. See, a lab, you'll be working with multiple people. And nowadays, like, collaboration is a must. So you have to learn how to work with people. And some of these guys become your colleagues and peers later in life, and they really help you in many different ways. For example, you write a paper, it has to go to review somewhere. If it goes to your friends, that's where it helps you the most. People review proposals, people do all kinds of reviews. Okay, so having good peers is very important. Okay, so you help people along the way, you maintain good relationships. That really helps later in your life, because they are the ones who will provide other kinds of support you need later. So you have to be very nice to people working with you in the labs and your other friends in other labs as well. Yeah. So yeah, so this is a nice cartoon I have from Calvin and Hobbes. So it says about writing. So okay, and can you go to the next slide? So this is the book which my advisor really recommended. A PhD is not enough. So if you think that you have a PhD degree, then life is done. No, it's not. It's like similar to IITs. Okay, when we are writing JE, they'll your parents or everyone who might say, "Beta, exam clear kar lo, life ban gaya." Then you come there and realize it's just beginning, right? So that's exactly it is. I mean, a PhD is really not enough. So you need to master really other skills, okay? And if you want to read about research, these are the two excellent. Does anyone know Richard Hammond? Okay, he's an electrical engineer, communications engineer. So he has a talk on research, you and your research. I would strongly recommend you to read both Nielsen's and Hamming's. And also, I recommend you to read that book. I read that book during second year of my PhD, but it's better you read it before you go for a PhD. Okay, so that book really emphasizes your other skills you need to really be successful during your research career. Okay, so these are some of the things which I think are really important. Okay, so I would like to stop here. So we took like 35 minutes or something, around 30 minutes. Yeah, so
So there were some questions. So what would you advise when we are selecting for a guide?
Yeah, okay, guide. As I said, the first thing is your research area. So you should be choosing an advisor. Of course, I mean the area which you like, which you really want to spend time. Okay, as I said, it's 9 to 5. People slog day in and day out. And the other thing is, yeah, so that is one important thing. The other thing is just see where the former students are. That will really give you an idea. See, in PhD, in academia, your advisor is very, very important. He writes letters, recommendation letters for you throughout your life. Okay? You need a recommendation letter from him to get a postdoc, to apply to any job, academic jobs. If you're through a tenure system, he will write you a letter for the tenure. That means to make your job permanent. If there's any award reward, he has to write a letter for you. So he will write letters for you till almost you retire or he survives. Okay, so it is that important. So and he has to take care of you at every level. So just see where the former students are. So if you want to be in academia, just see where the advisor is placing his students. Are they in academia? Or if you're in industry, you see where the former students are. Are they going to industry? And think about, okay, why are they not going to, why are they not going to academia if majority of the students going to industry? So you have to think all those things. And you need someone, as I said, fortunately, yeah, some of my advisors both my advisors were excellent. You need someone to tell you all these things, emphasize your writing skills, your presentations, someone who criticizes you brutally about all these things. Like my advisor, Arun, I think Arun was in IIT Bombay a few months back. No, I don't know, did any of you attend his lectures, Arun Yatiraj from Madison? I think Professor Rajoshi hosted them. Yeah, so anyway, so I wrote my first draft. Within an hour, he comes to my office waving the draft. He says, like, Reddy, you hate writing. But if you want to survive, it's impossible. That's when he gave me that PhD is not enough, and there are many other books. There's a book called Craft of Scientific Writing, which I refer to it even now. So you need someone who really tells you like what it is, someone who doesn't sugarcoat. He says your writing is crap. Yeah, this is where you have to improve it. If you're presenting and if you're doing a bad job, like my advisor, postdoc advisor, Dave Tirmala, he was brutal. He says that, okay, the slide is utterly crap and that's not how it should be done. So you want someone to really tell you what it is and someone who pushes you to do good things. You do your work and my advisor, they would say that, okay, we can do more, and he just pushes you to do more. You're tired at the end of it day, you want that work to be off your chest, right? Haan, khatam ho gaya, ab paper likhenge, chalo. You want to write the paper, get it off your chest and publish it. But they push you back to improve it, to do it better. So you need someone, yeah, you have to think about all these things. So you need someone who takes care of you throughout your academic career. Okay. And a good indicator is talking to former students.
I think we should take that first.
Yeah, Siddhant, you may proceed.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Very informative talk. Thank you very much. So I'm enamored by all these really interesting interdisciplinary branches like molecular biophysics, simulation chemistry, genomic medicine, drug designing. The list goes on. And I feel overwhelmed, kind of. I'm just in my second year, BS, and wondering how to start and how to explore these fields. How do I know what interests me? How do I put my time into something valuable and realize that I'm going to get something out of it? Any advice?
The best way is to, take up small projects in groups, and then, reading without doing anything will not give you a feel for what the field is really. So the best way to do it is take up small projects in those groups, in any group, and then try to do it. That will give you a feel of the work, the problems, and so on. Okay. So, nowadays, it's becoming very competitive. I see resumes where people work in multiple groups with summer projects and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think that's the best way. Yeah, doing the work will give you an idea of what's happening. Of course, reading journal papers also will tell you, but the journal paper doesn't tell you, right? The paper tells you a polished story. It doesn't tell you what happened in the background. Like it doesn't tell you the failures, the hard work, and so on. So unless you dirty your hands by working there, you'll not get a feel for the problem. So the best way is just pick the problems or the research groups which you're interested in and start doing simple small projects. That's an ideal way to learn about the area, to probe yourself whether you like it or not. That's the best way, I would say. And of course, reading would also help, but working is the best way to do it.
Thank you.
And pick small problems. They don't have to be very ambitious, okay? So, and most of the Nobel Prizes have come out from simple things, okay? People really thought about it's a simple, curious problem for the person, but it just turned out to be important. So, and that's how a majority of the breakthroughs have come out. So you have to be curious enough, and you have to really think, oh, why is that happening? And most of the research problems are like that. And nobody, I mean, very few things, mostly probably math. Some of these problems are so hard, like Riemann's hypothesis. People have tried to solve it, so then it becomes like an obsession for some people. Okay, if you solve it, you become famous. But like majority of the research problems are not like that. They're either these simple motivational problems, like okay, my kid has like a diabetes, or my kid has this problem, let me work on that. Or some majority of the people, they are simple, curious problems. They enjoy working on understanding things, and that's how they do it. So it depends, yeah. So yeah, just work in it. Just pick a small problem, do it on your weekends or whenever you have time. You will read more, you'll try to do it, you'll do the experiment, or you'll write a code, or you'll build a model to understand it. You keep doing it, you'll get a feel for that problem. Okay, so that's the best way.
We have one more hand raised.
Yeah.
You may ask Shweta.
Very good morning, sir. Thank you for giving such a broad perspective about PhD. Presently, in this COVID situation, we are not working in labs. We are basically focusing on literature.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to just make a decision whether I have to go for my PhD or whether I should go for a job. So it's a big problem like I am facing myself in order to find out, because I like to do lab work,
Okay.
but I have not experienced it much.
Okay.
So
I mean, see, at the end of the day, this will still be I mean, of course, it is hampering our plans by a year or two, but it's still, from your standpoint, right, from where you are, it's still a temporary, a short-term disruption, okay? If you really are interested in doing lab work, if you enjoy doing research in a lab setting, you should just go for it. In the meanwhile, yeah, you can prepare reading about it, you can think of the problems you can solve, or you can try to design new experiments around it. Yeah, you can do that thing, but from your standpoint, it's just a temporary thing. You're thinking about a very long-term setting, right? So if you enjoy doing lab work, you should still aim for it. It's just I mean, of course, we have disruptions maybe for a year, maybe for a two, but from your perspective, you're thinking about like a 20-year thing or a 30-year thing, okay? So that's what you're aiming for. So it's a really long-term thing. So you could still take that risk. So you should still really go for what is interesting to you and try to make it happen. Okay, so that is my advice.
okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
So, is it important to know everything to be an expert in any particular field?
Oh,
Like,
no,
how does
no, it doesn't work like that. Okay, yeah, so I don't know many things. So even I forgot all my general chemistry. Once you stop working using it, you'll keep forgetting everything. Okay. Yeah, if you ask me what is Pauli's exclusion principle, I have to think twice to answer it. Okay, because I don't use it. I rarely use quantum. So that's another misconception we have. Like in your first year, my advisor gave me a problem. Then I said, okay, let me read about it. You keep reading, but where will you stop? I mean, it's never ending, okay, reading. So at some point, you should just stop and start working on the problem. So you should read till a point where you can start working on the problem. Okay. That's when you start working, you'll face the obstacles. Then you have to read to overcome those obstacles. Okay, we'll never be an expert in anything. Okay, that's impossible. So we read the basics. Our basics should be strong. That's where, like, I like the undergraduate degree from ISC, from IIT, which I got. They taught us everything, which even though you like it. For example, I hated biochemistry, to tell you frankly, but now I'm working in biophysics. Okay, so but that biochemistry really helped me. Those two courses in my 5-year integrated MS in IT, that really helped me later in life during my PhD and postdoc. Because when we are in undergrad, we really don't know what we really want to do. So that's when having a broad exposure in multiple subjects will help you later in life. Okay, like I absolutely hated memorizing those amino acids and all those things. I mean, but later it works out. Yeah, just so we will never become an expert. So we have to make sure our basics are strong in what we are doing. Then we pick a problem, we read a little bit about it to understand what the problem is, what is known, what is not known, and then we start working on the problem. If you say that I'll become an expert, then I'll start solving the problem, that is never going to happen. You keep reading, you forget. You keep reading again, you forget. For example, I mean, what they taught us complex analysis, I don't know what the curriculum is now, but when I was in my third semester, I had a full complex analysis course. Of course, I don't remember nothing about it, but when I pick the book, it comes back very quickly. So we read about it, but it doesn't stick unless you start working, right? You'll forget things. So becoming an expert is, yeah, that's never going to happen. So the best thing, as I said, is you make sure your basics are strong. Then you find a problem, you read what is essential to start working on the problem, and then just start working on the problem. You cannot say that I'll become an expert in electrodynamics, I'll become an expert in whatever thermodynamics, I'll read everything, then I'll start work. You read this, you forget that. So it just keeps happening. Okay. So yeah, you have to stop reading at some point and start working. I mean, that's what many of us in PhDs try to do in the first. If you have a good advisor, he'll tell you stop reading. It's time to start working. Okay. So when you work, you'll automatically read focused reading. You'll do more focused reading to solve the problem. That's when I said, like, dirtying your hands will really teach you what the field is. You'll get a feel for everything. If you keep reading, we'll just keep reading. You're absorbing content from other people, but you're not creating any new content. Your goal is to create new content. It's like watching movies. You binge watch, but that is created by someone else. An ideal thing would be you creating the content and someone watching it. That way you can make money as well as other things. You get other benefits. So that's another good rule of thumb. You should always think, are you creating content or are you consuming content? You should be creating content. Even in research, are you creating new techniques or are you just using techniques from others? If you're creating new techniques, that's an ideal way. That is an ideal research. If you're just using other people's techniques, okay, you'll be solving interesting problems, but still, I mean, so creating versus consuming, yeah, keep that in mind.
Okay. So anything as to how you should apply for any university and, like what all things you should keep in mind and what's the culture of, abroad higher studies or, in India, if someone wants to pursue some higher studies. So is there any culture change?
No, nowadays I don't see any cultural change. Okay, so I've worked like for 10 years and then came back. So, and many of my colleagues have also come back. So we don't see any major difference actually. So now the differences are really going away. So, so what else do you want to know? I mean, in terms of cultural setting, yeah, I didn't think that difference actually. So that's not an issue right now. And many people in India are doing well now. Now we have like many science institutes now. Like okay, when I was doing my undergrad there, only Bombay, Kharagpur, and Kanpur had a 5-year program. Other than that, there was nothing else. So that way we were like elite. We were used to get admissions in abroad from US universities very easily. But now because of ISAs and other IITs as well, I mean now you have a large pool applying probably. So yeah, but I don't think there's any major difference, and there are many groups in India which are doing well. Of course, we have our own challenges; they have their own challenges, and so on. So, but the key is, as I said, producing a good research thesis depends on you, not on your advisor. It depends a little bit on your advisor, but it depends mostly on you because you're the one who is really pushing the problem. So it depends on how you drive the problem, how ambitious you are, and like how hard you're working. As I said, I mean, pushing a little, not, we are not, I'm not even talking about major breakthrough, just trying to understand a little bit more or develop, improve a technique a bit further. It requires like tremendous amount of work. It's not easy unless you're willing to put in a lot of effort. And I've seen like I get to see Professor Michael Fisher. I don't know if you know him. He worked on phase transitions. Is like one of the uh, pioneers in developing this renormalization group theory, which is a theory to understand phase transition. Even at 80 years old, he used to work very hard. I mean, some of his students used to get messages from him at 1 o'clock in the night. He used to think about things and he used to send a note to the student so that the student can watch next day and see what is it. So they work really, really hard. These people whom we think intelligent, I mean, they work really hard. So it doesn't come easily. So you have to be willing to put in the work. So the point is, unless you're interested, it doesn't happen. It's the same thing with creating a company as well. If you want to start a company, you have to slog like hell. It's not like 9 to 5. It's the same thing. But here the motivation should be much stronger because your stipends will be much lower. Your friend who is working in an industry in the US will be earning 2 times more than you. So, and probably, and you're working much harder than him. So he switches off maybe at 6 o'clock and he doesn't think about work, but you go have dinner and you're still thinking, मेरा experiment क्यों नहीं काम कर रहा है? Or why is my code not working? So, so your motivation should be much more stronger than the other person, right? So,
Yeah. So I guess we all are covered with most of our questions for now.
No,
And-
Arnab has a question. I think Arnab has raised his hand. Arnab, please go ahead.
Yeah, very informative talk, sir. Thank you very much. So I'm just asking that for this pandemic situation, most of us have no lab experience and all to write in our CV or resume. So foreign research group, how it will be considered by foreign research group? I mean, how much chances is there to get the PhD opportunity for us?
I don't think, I mean, people know about the situation. So I know that all the institutes are shut. Most of the US universities are also online now. Okay, so I mean, so all the universities, a majority of them are having an online semester. So they know the problems. Okay, so don't worry too much about it. So yeah, if you have anything, yeah, just okay, yeah, this is one another thing. If you think that your application has a problem, right? That if you think you can correct it in your, as I said, in your 4th year or 5th year. Like for example, for any reason you get a D or a C, okay, or maybe an F in a course, you can correct it by taking an elective related to that course and getting a better grade. then you can write it in your SOP or your whatever statement of purpose. You can say that, okay, there was a problem, you goofed up, but you have corrected it, and make sure that whoever writes you a letter addresses that. You understand what I'm saying? So this
But
is
sir, this doubt is coming from an MSc final year
Yes,
student
sir. Actually, yes,
who
sir.
does not have an
Actually,
option for any
this,
further
yeah,
corrections.
that's okay. But
this last
if
year.
you're just talking about lab work, that's okay. I mean, it's not a big problem because people know that there's a problem. I mean, none of the labs are working. Yeah, our institute is also completely shut. All the students are home. So it's okay. I mean, you just write, that's the situation everywhere. So this is not a big problem because people know about it. But what I'm trying to tell you about other things, if you think your application has a specific defect, right? Thinking in your fourth year, just take a similar elective and then try to get a better grade and try to fix that and address it so that people just don't look at the transcript and say, why is that a problem? Because this happens. So for example, I can tell you from one of our students applied. I mean, he worked in multiple labs and his recommendations were stellar, but none of us knew that he had a F and a D. But his lab work was amazing. His research work was amazing. He published 2 papers and he was an excellent student. And his other grades were very good, but we never knew that he had an F and a D. Then, because I knew another professor who wrote him a letter, knew some of the professors abroad, they contacted us saying that, okay, look, the recommendations are stellar. Why did this guy get a F here and a D in these courses? Since that, I mean, that might not happen, and this was a lucky case. I mean, since we knew those people, they got back to us. But so that's a problem. So now we could address it. Since we are on the phone now, you can tell the other professors, okay, I mean, that's not a major issue. He got F and a D for so and so reason, but he fixed those issues by taking, or we can say, for example, if it's a programming course which he got a D, and he worked on a programming project with me, I would just tell him, no, his programming skills are excellent. That's not a problem. That's just an aberration and whatever. So these are some of the things which you guys should think. But this COVID situation, yeah, just don't worry about it. People know that it's a problem, right? So it's all right. So, but for others,
Okay, sir. Thank you.
yeah, think about, if you think there's an issue, just try to address it. So that's that's one of the things I told you, that think about these things in your third, fourth year and so on. But even in your fifth year, just try to address it somehow. Don't leave it. Don't pray that people will ignore it, not look at it in the application and so on. People know what to look for. They've scrutinized thousands of applications, okay? They know what to look, where to look, and so on. You cannot think that, okay, just by ignoring it, people will also ignore it, or you hope that people will not notice it. That doesn't work generally. Just address it either from your recommendation letters or by taking other courses. Yeah, if you have a problem, you can, whoever is writing you a letter, tell them that this could be a problem, can you please address it? Like was I said, one example, like if I think, even if the person doesn't call me from abroad, if my student tells me that, okay sir, I got a D or a C in this course, and can you address that skill in my letter? If I knew that he's a very good programming, I would just write it in the letter. Okay, so that saying that it's not a big issue and so on. So you have to think about these things. Okay, just don't hope that people will ignore those things. So you have to actively try to address these things. Okay, so any
Yes,
other?
sir. Thank you.
So are we now done with the questions? Okay, yeah. So, sir, before we wrap up, we all would actually like to thank you for such an enlightening presentation on like how do we lead to a right future, like how should we do all the things, and we appreciate having this vast area clarified by you. We all have great challenges in our life, but we also have great opportunities. And with your guidance, we would surely meet them all and lead a better future.
Yeah. It was fun talking to you, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, sir.